Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, today I want to talk about the Vinsmoke's past, in order to potentially try and understand and theorize what could be the Vinsmoke's role in the future of the story. And so this is a topic that we have touched upon and made a video on in the past, but I think that it's important to bring it up again and make new arguments for it with the current events in the manga. And specifically as we draw nearer to the end of Whole Cake Island itself. And so guys, obviously today the Vinsmokes are a roaming country, but in the past, they used to be an empire. An empire that controlled the entirety of the North Blue. And we learned from a conversation between Judge Vinsmoke and Big Mom that the Vinsmokes ruled over the North Blue until approximately 300 years ago. And so guys, let's actually read this conversation that occurred between Judge and Big Mom, because I think that it's a clue and an unresolved plot that must be resolved while the Vinsmoke are still relevant in the story, and I think it's incredibly interesting. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten about it. But as Judge goes to defend the Straw Hats and Luffy against Big Mom, he says this to her: "Our dreams are dust. What am I to say to the ghosts that have not even land to step foot on, after those 66 short days of hope? We entrusted you with the 300-year-old desires, the chagrin of our people." And so it's pretty clear that about 300 years ago, the Vinsmokes were overthrown and their empire destroyed. But what we don't know is why. We don't know anything of the story or of its context. But we are led to believe that the name of the Vinsmoke was synonymous with evil, and that they ruled the North Blue with a, quote, iron fist. And perhaps it was this which justified the necessity of their removal from power. The only real clue that we have to go on about any sort of context is that there's propaganda which exists that perhaps implicates the Marines as being involved with the Vinsmoke's defeat. Because of the comic strip, Sora, Warrior of the Sea. Sora being a Marine, constantly fighting the evil, mythical Vinsmoke army. But if I'm honest guys, and I know that this is just a theory because we do not know, and this may be a bit counter to what we've actually been given, but I think that we should be very, very skeptical of what we suppose that we know. And I think the first clue that really sticks out to me is the existence of this comic strip itself, Sora, Warrior of the Sea. Vito describes this as propaganda to make people idolize the Marines, but at the same time it solidifies the thought, the association between Germa 66 and evil. Even though Germa 66 is now part of the world government. This honestly reminds me a lot about the world government's take on the ancient weapon and the propaganda that they may or may not have created surrounding them and the ancient kingdom. The world government is known for destroying history and creating fear where it may not have ever existed. As we've talked about on multiple occasions with the ancient weapons and the ancient kingdom, I don't think that the ancient kingdom was an evil entity. I don't think that they ever really wanted to use the ancient weapons to destroy the world. But it certainly benefits the world government for people to believe this, if they know about the existence of this kingdom at all. I think that at this point, we know the world government and the rulers, the Celestial Dragons, too well for it to be believable that they saved the North Blue from the oppression of the Vinsmoke. For me, it's all too convenient. And I believe that this offers up a lot of room for doubt. How exactly do we know that the Vinsmokes were tyrannical and evil? Well, we learned it not from them, not from any real history, but we learned it from Brook. If we suppose that the Vinsmoke were defeated and destroyed 300 years ago, then Brook wouldn't know the truth. Brook would only know what it is that he has been told, perhaps influenced or not by propaganda that may or may not be factual. Put simply, Brook is not a trustworthy source. If the world government wished to spread the idea that the Germa 66 were an evil mythical kingdom that ruled the North Blue with an iron fist, then they could do that. And it doesn't have to be true. And I think that this aligns with what Judge says to Big Mom. Obviously it is not clear, but he spoke of those 66 short days of hope. and the dreams of the Vinsmoke and its people to one day return to power. power. Overall, the impression that I get of this conversation is that maybe the Vinsmokes were done dirty. That perhaps they were overthrown unjustly. But still, we lack anything definitive, any real evidence to suggest that we know anything about how the Vinsmokes really ruled the North Blue and what it was like during that time. But what's interesting, guys, is that we actually do have some amount of evidence about maybe what the North Blue was like in the past, because we've seen the North Blue in the past. Specifically, we've seen people from the North Blue who would have been under the rule of the Germa Empire. I'm talking about Noland the Liar, Mont Blanc Noland. 400 years ago, Mont Blanc Noland from the North Blue visited Jaya. And so 400 years ago, guys, puts Noland as from the North Blue during the time that the North Blue was ruled by the Germa Empire. And what I find so interesting about this is that just like the Germa today specialize in technology, they are masters of science and technology. Mont Blanc Noland was a scientist. Specifically, he was a botanist. He researched plants, often in connection with their possible healing properties. In addition to this, there is another similarity, another connection, which is that Noland was also an explorer. And we can see that we don't know anything about the Vinsmoke of the past, but the Vinsmoke today are part of or travel on a moving country. I think that at one point in time, it's almost guaranteed that the Vinsmoke and Germa 66 actually had an island that they ruled over, an island that they could call home. But at the same time, you have to wonder, what influenced them to create a moving country? Did they always have this? When they were defeated 300 years ago in the past, was this something that they had already created? Again, here we do not know. But if the Vinsmoke had already created what could be considered a moving country, even before they were dethroned from the North Blue, then maybe they were also explorers. And perhaps there's something that might justify this. Noland describes to Kalgra how his home had once suffered from tree fever, the same disease that was destroying Jaya. Noland says this: 60 years ago, my home was suffering like yours. It was attacked by a highly contagious disease, tree rush. It killed 100,000 people. The death rate was 90%. But in recent years, the chance of dying from that disease is less than 3%. That is because the herbalists of the South Sea found a special vaccine. This medicine is the result of the collaboration of researchers around the world. What I want you guys to understand is that collaboration between the various seas of the One Piece world, we don't hear about that occurring very often. And we don't hear about that occurring today. And we definitely do not see the world government facilitating such collaborations. This really makes you wonder about how the Vinsmoke ruled the North Blue. They controlled its entirety. And yet during their reign, the North Blue collaborated with the other seas, specifically the South Blue, in order to find a cure for a disease ravaging Noland's homeland within the North Blue. And so guys, this is so perfect because we have a direct counterexample about how the world government handled a similar situation. It's honestly so perfect that I can't believe it. I have to believe that this is Oda foreshadowing, laying subtle clues as to how the North Blue has changed since the Vinsmoke were dethroned. Another kingdom that we know that resides within the North Blue is the kingdom of Flevance, Law's home island. And so guys, before we get into this further, I just want to point out a coincidence, or not, which is the association between Flevance and medicine. Just the same as Noland, both Flevance and Noland's homeland being from the North Blue. They also seem to be somewhat technologically advanced. Everything that Trafalgar Law knows about medicine, it's assumed that he learned growing up in Flevance. But anyway guys, to the story of Flevance itself, I think that it's too perfect that both Livneal, the country that Noland came from, and Flevance both encountered an epidemic of disease. Flevance with amber-lead sickness, and Livneal with tree rush. But Livneal was saved by collaboration of medicine, despite the Vinsmoke ruling the North Blue with a quote iron fist at the time. And yet centuries after they were dethroned, faced with a similar situation, Flevance was abandoned. In fact, they even sought help from neighboring countries. But the world government specifically changed the truth so that nobody would help them. Even though tree rush was far more dangerous because it was actually contagious. Guys, for me, it's as though Oda is saying, this is how it was while the Vinsmoke ruled. And this is how it is now with the rule of the world government. Which one is worse? Basically, guys, what I am trying to speculate is that the Vinsmoke family, Germa 66, centuries in the past when they ruled over the North Blue, spread the ideal of science and medicine. And that their dreams of the past revolved around the hope to one day eliminate the threat of disease and illness. But the world government does not wish for us to know that and has changed history. The truth is, guys, I think that it's so easy to believe in what we're being told about the Vinsmokes of the past, because the Vinsmokes of the past, the impression that we get of them is the same as the Vinsmokes of today. But perhaps the Vinsmokes of today, led by Judge Vinsmoke, are not representative of how they have always been. Here's another potential connection. We know that 400 years in the past, or 460 years in the past, Liveneel Kingdom was saved from tree rush by collaboration between scientists of medicine. And sometime in the past, Judge Vinsmoke was part of a research group studying the origins of life itself. The connection here is collaboration of science. Maybe that is what the Vinsmoke have always stood for. Is it any coincidence that the world government also considered Vegapunk and Judge Vinsmoke's research group outlaws? Is it any coincidence that they were stopped and captured and forced to work for the world government? Is Oda very low-key making a point? And here's another potential connection. This is what Noland says to Kagura: killing an innocent girl without blinking your eye and acting as if it is no big deal, so cold-blooded. All of your actions and ideals are inhuman. Who else do we know that kills innocents without blinking their eye and acts as if it is no big deal? Who else are described as being inhuman? The Vinsmoke today. There are so many strong parallels between what Noland told Kagura and what Sanji told his families. Royals who treat the lives of their subordinates as nothing more than expendable pawns. Everything you do, everything you stand for, goes completely against every fiber in my body. We seem to have seen two sides of the Vinsmoke nature. On one hand, you have Judge, consumed by the desire for revenge. And on the other hand, you have his wife Sora and his children Revujo and Sanji. I wonder if this is another subtle way in which Oda is describing how the Vinsmokes were to how the Vinsmokes are today. Maybe Sora and Sanji and Revujo represent how the Vinsmoke have always been, and specifically how they were when they ruled over the North Blue many centuries ago, before bitterness and resentment changed them. Perhaps in the past, the Vinsmokes had always been kinder than anybody. I want to point something interesting out to you guys. It's been reiterated on multiple occasions that the Vinsmokes today no longer value emotions. In the very last chapter of One Piece, Judge himself calls emotions useless. He tells Luffy that Sanji has a weak mind and is unfit to be a soldier. And this adds up with the fact that Judge was motivated to strip his children of emotions of compassion and empathy. What Oda wants us to know is that emotions, or the lack of emotions, is incredibly important to Judge, and the question that we should be asking is why? Why is he so concerned with his children having emotions? Why does he so passionately hate emotions? And I personally think that it may be because the Vinsmoke family, 300 years in the past, were defeated and dethroned because they were too kind. They lacked the ability to do what was necessary in order to fight back. They valued life too much. And the Vinsmoke's family, the heritage itself, has a propensity, has the inherent nature of kindness. And Judge felt as though the only way, in order for the Vinsmokes to achieve their dreams and restore their reputation, was to remove this part of them, their weakness. And so guys, I don't have any really eloquent way of putting this, and this is going to be some heavy speculation. Again, I want you guys to keep in mind that we don't really know anything. But I wonder if Oda laid additional clues which let us understand what happened to the Vinsmokes in the past, and that maybe that these clues can be derived from how the Vinsmoke think today. This will go along the same lines as what we've just speculated. Judge cares to remove emotions because emotions have always been the weakness of the Vinsmoke. Judge also cares to make all of his subordinates be incapable of betraying him, of not following his orders. The question here is, were the Vinsmokes betrayed by their own subordinates in the past? Is this what fuels his motivation today? Is it any coincidence that Judge hangs a picture in their hall of him defeating kings from the North Blue? Were the Vinsmoke betrayed by the substituent countries within their empire? Is it any coincidence that 400 years in the past, while the Vinsmoke were supposedly ruling over the North Blue, we got to meet the king of Livneel, who was both greedy and cruel? Is it any coincidence that in Flevance, the entire country itself was abandoned except for its royals? Did the kings and royals of the various countries within the North Blue ally themselves with the world government in order to conspire to take down the Germa Empire? In addition to this, the Vinsmoke repeat over and over that royals should act like royals. Is the reason why this is so important to Judge because the Vinsmoke have not always acted like royals? And in some way or another, Judge blames this as part of the reason why the Vinsmokes were dethroned and their dreams destroyed. And the Vinsmoke today are devoting all of their resources into developing technology for warfare. Maybe this is Judge's response for the Vinsmoke not historically doing the same, devoting their science and technology to things as superfluous as medicine. If they had only devoted more of their time to researching warfare, then maybe the German Empire would exist today. Essentially, guys, what I'm speculating is that Judge Vinsmoke has changed, has decided to change the very nature of what it means to be a Vinsmoke, because he thinks of his ancestors as failures, much the same as he sees Sanji today. But maybe the truth is that Sanji really represents what it means to be a Vinsmoke king. But anyway, guys, I know that this is speculative, but I hope that you guys were able to follow me. Essentially, what I have speculated is that the Vinsmoke, many years in the past as they ruled over the North Blue, inspired advancements in technology and medicine, and that they, just like Sanji and Sora and Revujo today, were inherently kind, who value life more than anything. We pretty much already know that the world government and the celestial dragons essentially want to take control over the entire world. And so then from this perspective, it would make sense that in order to conquer the world, they needed to conquer the North Blue, which was ruled over by the Vinsmoke. So in order to conquer the world, they had to defeat the Vinsmoke. So they conspired with the various kings of the Kingdom of the North Blue, who were incredibly greedy, to take down the Vinsmoke. And the idea is that the world government helped promote propaganda that the Vinsmoke were evil and ruled over the North Blue as tyrants. And guys, although this video is entirely speculation in it of itself, I want to use this to potentially speculate the future of the Vinsmoke, because I do believe that this is true. More so than I believe that the Vinsmoke have always been evil and inhuman. And so guys, to get straight to the point, I think that Sanji needs to remind Judge of the true nature of the Vinsmoke and what they have always stood for. Because the greatest power that the Vinsmoke have ever had and have historically had is the power to love and to care. It was this nature of the Vinsmoke family which allowed them to develop the empire by uniting the North Blue. And it's the same power that has allowed Sanji to grow past his limits and to be in a position to achieve what should be unachievable. I think that most of us can agree that the way that the One Piece story goes is, typically speaking, all of these Strat's enemies end up becoming allies eventually, and I expect the same for the Vinsmoke. I expect by the time that the end of the story comes around, the Vinsmoke will be fighting with the Strats. But Oda has laced within this narrative that Sanji cannot stand his family, and that everything they stand for is contrary to his being. I think that this is Oda's way of hinting that the Vinsmoke need to change. And I think that for Oda to ignore this narrative that he himself has built up within the story would just leave a bad taste in my mouth. Like, Oda gave Sanji and the Strats something to do, but they never did it. And honestly, all these connections, these potential connections that I've derived that perhaps substantiate the Vinsmoke as being not as we are being led to believe, adds up perfectly with this idea that the Vinsmoke must change. The current iteration of the Vinsmoke must change, because they have been corrupted. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I had to say today. As always, curious as to what you guys have to say about this, whether you agree or disagree, and why. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.